name is Peter Cinnamon and this is an Irish League podcast called Kicking Match. And if you think your local town sticking up Christmas decorations is a tad early, then have a thought for Glentoran fans who don't know what to think right now, as everybody else seems to be saying we may as well tie red, black and green ribbons around the Gibson Cup already. We all know league titles don't get given out at Christmas, only pitch-related match postponements. So far, losing against Glentoran only seems to make the other team more angry, so they may have to rethink that strategy. However, making the East Belfast men wear black in pretty much every single game to, make them forget their Glentoran looks to have been a masterstroke by McDermott so far. Elsewhere, Larne bounced back, Linfield outlast Ports and Cliftonville give away a lead easier than Dungannon do penalties. We are properly in the trenches now, my friend. Floodlights are on for most of the second halves for these big moments. The league table should not be sniffed at, and all these hard yards right now, these are where seasons start to soar or falter. And the man returning to the podcast to help me chat through it all, it is sports reporter for Cool FM. Thank you, and it's great to have you back, Gareth McCullough.
Thanks very much, Peter. Thanks for having me back. Obviously, mustn't have done too bad a job the last time since you've asked me back so quickly.
It is fantastic to have you back, sir. And you once again, this is not the only reason I have you on, clearly, but it's nice to sit there and get a little book out, as you are a rarity. You are a unicorn in this world so far. You help me with my diversity stats incredibly as I'm able to mark down journo and Newry City reporter. And you were at the game on Friday. I hope your little cockles have been warmed up. I'm still pretty freezing from my adventure on Saturday.
It was cold enough. It was as cold, I suppose, as the fare being served up by particularly Newry, to be quite honest. Comfortably Newry's worst performance of the season. No disrespect to Ballymena, but it was really, really poor.
And we start there. We've talked loads about all the big teams and their big results. We'll have you here. Let's put Newry at the top of the slate for the first time this season. And by all your accounts, it's not for the best reasons. I was there backing them last week saying this is the chance for Newry to go to Ballymena and get those results. But maybe is the slide on for the Mourne men based on that performance, perhaps? Well, we'll not judge too much. Of course, you're going to get used to the sight of Ballymena. They'll be coming to your house in a few days. What went wrong then from Newry? 3-0 it ended in favour of Ballymena.
It's hard to pinpoint. There's probably not one thing in particular, but probably a number of different facets. Personally, and I'm never one to criticise tactics because, look, I don't have my coaching badges. I just report on the stuff. So, we can call ourselves expert to a certain extent, just not not on the tactical side of it. But I did think Newry probably tried to match Ballymena in terms of maybe like a physical aspect of it instead of sort of playing their own game. You can put it down to maybe one of those games where it just didn't happen. If you saw the penalty for the first goal, it was just a comedy of errors that led to that. It's a good penalty to Mikey Place, who was comfortably the best player in the pitch the other night. He was fantastic. And then even like Decky Carville is one where Mikey Place actually heads one onto the bar, like a rifle of a shot from about 10 yards. And if that goes in, it's 1-1. Could be a different game. But Jordan Gibson then scores an absolute cracker of a goal in the top corner. And then the last one, you're pushing up, trying to get something out of it. But in saying that, whilst 3-0, probably Ballymena fans probably say 3-0 was a fair reflection on the game, I probably couldn't disagree with that. It's the only time this season I've seen a number of the Newry players actually sort of come over and apologise to the fans at the end of the game. And I know Darren Mullen put a tweet out, from the club, basically him saying, he takes responsibility, apologise to the fans. It's not. I don't think the issue on Friday night was losing. It was more the standard of the performance. It was just a lot of the games we've lost this season have been reasonably good performances. They've given big teams certainly a run for their money. As you said there, that was a real opportunity for Newry to go and close the gap, I suppose, in one of their rivals. But credit to Ballymena. I don't want to take anything away from Ballymena because, I could turn out and say how poor Newry were. But, Ballymena haven't been the best run this season. They knocked the ball about well. It was a cold night. It was probably a bumpy enough pitch, but they took their chances. Credit to Ballymena. From a Newry perspective, it was just flat, I think is the best way to describe it. So it's probably a good thing that not only do they have another Newry, from a Newry perspective, they have another game coming up so quickly, but that it's against the same team. because there could be no excuses really for not getting anything against them on Tuesday night, because you know what went wrong, you know what doesn't work. So hypothetically, being the optimist that I am, you would like to think those, so we say, errors will be rectified and come Tuesday night. But we live in hope. It's the hope that kills you, Peter.
It's really not something anybody really enjoys. I know it's something that pops up a lot more in this league because we have 12 top teams and you have the cup competitions and all the rest, but I know it's a quirk of the schedule. Where are these Tuesday games the ones that were moved over because of the passing of the Queen? So
Indeed, yeah.
look, it's a bit of an odd one that you're playing them instantly really after you've already played them. I don't think any team really prefers it. Win, lose, or draw, you just feel, oh, do I really want to lose them again? Do I want to take these guys on again? I'm sure it's weird to play, particularly when each game is their own. It's not two-legged football here, so it's going to be different. At least you have them coming down to the Newry Showgrounds. But I think you made a really good point in regards to what maybe started clicking for Ballymena, and you talked about how they were able to take their chances. That isn't something they've really been able to do. When I've ever seen them, it feels like once they get it up past midfield, or it's deep balls from either of the wing backs, usually coming from Ross Redmond, it goes into the box and it's not really going anywhere, or it's bouncing about the place, or no one's really taking charge, getting the ball, and creating chances out of that. Now, a part of that is because you have new players up there. You have Gibson and you have McDade, and the stats will tell you McDade has found his footing, he's found his place in this team, he's really started to go this season. You saw that on Friday night. He got a goal there, really well taken goal, brilliant shot, but of course you go one down from a penalty only 19 minutes in. Never something you want to do, particularly when you're the away team. You want to get in, keep that even for as long as possible, and hope to start finding yourself and grow into the game. Watching the penalty that was given away, I know these things can happen, but the ball comes in. Is it Amore who has to kick it away, and it bounces off another player? And then, was it for handball, or was it for just the fact that the ball comes back and then his boot's still out there? He takes down the Ballymena player and he just hands up in the air going, oh, this was totally our fault here.
One of those ones, even just before that, Stephen Moner, right back, who's just coming back from injury, he's sort of gone in almost for a standing up 50-50 challenge, but the way he's facing in towards his own box, so he actually wins the ball, but he inadvertently plays it back into our box. Manny Aurora goes to hack it clear, as exactly you do in a crowded penalty area, 6 yards out, smacks off Darren King, who had no option. He couldn't have got out of the way. Falls back to Manny again. He goes to have another crack at putting it into the stand, and I'm not sure who it was. Might have been Jordan Gibson, I think. Just gets. I mean, it's a fraction of a second. It's one of those ones where, looking back on it, we thought it was a Stonewall penalty at the time, and it probably is. Looking back on it, you're probably going, I've seen those not given in the past, but I think in the balance of it, yeah, it's a penalty, and it's one of those. It's an absolute freak of an incident. So that puts them in a really, really good position in the game. The half time probably came at the worst time for Newry, because they're starting to get a little foothold in the game, and that was sort of dampened down, I suppose, by the halftime break. But like, you're very few managers when you come up against that are as good when their team is on top as seeing out a game as David Jeffrey. He wasn't playing the likes of a Linfield, a Glentoran, or a Larne, or even a Cliftonville. The greatest respect to Newry, you're playing a team down the lower echelons of the league, and he would have been disappointed if he didn't see that. His team saw out really well, and Newry just never got going. Just one of those nights. So you credit to Ballymena. I mean, they're going to be looking at obviously building a bit of momentum now, and they'll be overflowing with confidence coming into Tuesday night. Unfortunately for Newry,
the fire isn't burning up there in Ballymena, but there's a few embers, hot coals. Wouldn't stick my hand in just at the minute. That win is pretty handy for them. They're coming off the back of that defeat to Glenavon. Freak game. They could have got a draw. Really should have got a result the way they kicked on. They get that draw against Dungannon before. And before that, it was the 2 out of 2 against Coleraine and Portadown. So as much as I've flip-flopped in many ways and how I feel about them, it's about getting results there. They did get the results against Newry, and they did get it previously. And they'll look to get another one on Tuesday. For Newry, look, I was chatting to your podcast co-host, Newry fan as well, obviously, and I've kind of been texting him every once in a while, and people have seen how Newry have been able to run the likes of Linfield and Glentoran somewhat close. At one point, his frustrations kind of bubbled over when he texted me saying, "I'm kind of sick of talking about we came close. And I just want to get, this means nothing. I just want to get results." And you are sitting there with 9 points. You've got the 3 wins, brilliant result against Glenavon, and you've got the wins against Dungannon and Portadown. And Dungannon and Portadown are the results you'll really need. But are you feeling that as well, where Newry, they're the peppy team, they're the new boys on the block, everybody likes to say how you play fast football, and yes, you came oh so close against the likes of the big boys. It's slightly frustrating that as much as the effort was there, you need to get points in this league, and you can see how there's opportunities that have somewhat slipped away. You were fingertips away from getting something.
I couldn't have put it better. As you said, and as you said, Ali's been saying as well. I think that is a sort of growing frustration, and look, it's a growing frustration. I think from talking to Darren Mullen as well, it's a frustration for him as well. Yes, Newry want to go and win the right way or get points the right way by playing good football. They don't want to sit and put 11 men behind the ball and hopefully eke out a point here and there and things like that. And that has to be admired. But like the Dungannon sort of thing, the way they like to play out from the back, and they won't sacrifice their beliefs, that they won't sacrifice his beliefs in that regard. Sometimes you have to be pragmatic, and sometimes you have to play, horses for courses in this league. Another facet of that is that you don't want to be seen to be raising your game, I feel like, when you're playing the so-called big boys, which I'm not saying Newry have done, but they've competed a lot better than they did, for example, on Friday night. Those 3 wins, but particularly the Dungannon and Portadown ones, as you mentioned, are absolutely huge, even at this early stage of the season, because those teams will begin to pick up points at some stage sooner rather than later. So Newry maybe aren't able to play that fast, free-flowing football at the minute because over the last few weeks, probably had between 5 and 6 players out for each game and don't have the strength and depth to be able to cover that. So you do have to be a bit more pragmatic in terms of the frustration as being seen as the sort of even the nearly men or plucky old Newry. I think we probably talked about this the last time, even the earliest stage of the season. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to be recognised. It's nice to have people. I spoke to people in Larne on Friday morning at the launch of their Academy for Sport, and people from Larne, from the club saying, I've seen Newry this season. Newry will be fine. No problem. And you go, that's all well and good. And that has to translate into actual points on the board, you know what I mean? So it can be frustrating. I want them to play good football and they want them to be enjoyable to watch, but give me a boring 0-0 draw, own 10 of those for the remainder of the season, and a few wins here and there, and I'll be absolutely delighted, So it's horses for courses, mate.
Final word on that cracker from Jordan Gibson. He shimmies onto his right foot, fires it in. Mm-hmm. From outside the box. That was a bit of a beauty, wasn't it?
Oh, I mean, we were standing right behind it on the angle in the away stand, and the second it left his boot, you knew it was in the top corner. And even watching it back, it looked fantastic at the time. And from the angle we were up and watching it back in the highlights, it was even better. Stevie Maguire's full length, quite high off the ground, and he can't get near it, So it's one of those ones, if you're probably looking at it from a Newry perspective in the first instance, going, well, how's he got that space on the edge of the box to line up a shot? But he still has to hit it. He still has to put it in the postage stamp, and he did. Look, he was a good, great player at Carrick. I thought he was really good. He's got his move to Ballymena, and he looked very good the other night. Looked very effective. The archetypal cliche, great touch for a big man type of thing,
Beautiful touch there. It feels like if I was in the opposition stand, you'd just be looking around and being like, wow, well, I've got to give this a good clap because that was brilliant. And of course, we do have to give an assist here to Maguire. When we look at this back at the end of the season, I always talk about this, the supporting actor. I'm sure he wanted to save it, but that big stretch, that made it look about twice as better. Pinging off the crossbar, but style points, absolutely. That's what makes it even better.
If the amount of time Stevie's died full length to make opposition goals look spectacular, if those could be converted into points come the end of the season for Newry, that would be fantastic from my perspective. But yeah, you're right. It does make it, from an aesthetic perspective, it does make it look even better. It's a great dig. Just one of those ones you just have to hold your hands up in terms of the actual strike. As I say, he shouldn't probably have been given that space in the first instance, but there was nobody. There was a couple of groans, obviously, from the Newry stand when the ball went in, but there was a sort of a What do you say? You just have to hold your hands up sometimes.
You alluded to this. We'll shift over to the other game on Friday night. It was Lauren's big day. They launched this like center of sport. I don't know. It looks very, very nice with the pitch and everything else. They had a pre-game light show seemingly on TV. So they were bringing out all the fancy bits and pieces, but nothing will look as better this season for Lauren than that first half performance. It ends against Crusaders 4-1, but all four of those goals are scored in a blitz in the first half. So dominating, so stylish, so pulsating, and all this off the back of a very poor result the week previous against Glentoran. People were wondering, after hyping up Larne as title contenders, as soon as they go to Glentoran, they're swiped away. How were they going to react? Like, you couldn't have made up a better reaction than that. Just put Crusaders to the sword, and they did it in style.
You couldn't have come up with a more perfect response against, and it's no mean feat against a team like Crusaders, who on any given day are going to give you their fill of it, and certainly from a physical aspect. So Crusaders would have been coming into that relatively confident of maybe getting something out of it. But I just look at that Larne squad and I still maintain that Glentoran will win the league. And I probably said that, early on, very, very early on in the season. And it's I'm not exactly sticking my neck on the line there. But I was up at that Larne Academy of Sport launch on Friday morning from a work perspective. And I mean, everything going on off the pitch is phenomenal. It's the absolute benchmark for anybody in the Irish League. Taking away the financial investment, the way the club's run and structured is just phenomenal. And that feeds into how things go on the pitch. You're walking in and all the players were there, and you were just looking at everywhere you looked, there was a big name player. I'd look around one side, and one side of me was standing Paul O'Neill, then there was Lee Bonus, then there was Leroy Miller, then there was Jeff Hughes, who doesn't even start anymore. He's a former Northern Ireland international. Going back briefly to the Glentoran game last week, Glentoran are a fantastic side, but the pivotal point there was Leroy Miller going off injured. We discussed that with a few people at Larne on Friday morning, and I think that was probably borne out on Friday evening, the match. Leroy Miller, from what I saw, and I did only see the highlights, but scores one. I think he sets up at least one, if not two. Certainly plays a part in two of the other goals. I just think he's just a beast in midfield, and he scores goals. He does sort of everything, and he's improving as a technical footballer as well. When you've got somebody like that in the heart of the pitch, along with Sule, along with Ben Doherty, and then you've got the likes of Bonus and Paul O'Neill up front, when that clicks, as it did in the first half in particular on Friday night, they're forced to be reckoned with. And look, if you're a Larne fan, or and you were doubting your team, or if you're an opposition fan, as you were touching on there, maybe thinking that, maybe Larne just aren't quite up to it. I mean, they'll have rubbed a few people's noses on it on Friday night, so they will be right there come the finish of the season.
It's starting to look like it, and as much as we all like to see the big thunderbolts from yards and yards out, I don't want to sound like the football hipster here, but I don't think there will be more beautiful goals than that Leroy Miller goal. Cosgrove has it just in the opposition half. He looks up and just pinpoint. He sees the run from Miller cross the pitch, and when he gets the ball in the box, he's free as a bird. No one's around him, because it was just a perfect pass and the perfect run. All he needs to do is slot it home. He did it with vigor and aplomb. I do need to mention this for Crusaders, because you mentioned them going into this game. They were up for this. They were on a good run. They were putting away teams in the bottom six, but they were doing it very efficiently. And it looked as though they were slowly but surely building up their little run to stay in that pack at the top of the table. When you look at that side and you see that they're missing BJ Burns, still without Kennedy, they're still without Heatley, they have no Ross Clark, and you have to shuffle that team around, and you can kind of see it's on that right hand side where a lot of the goals come from. When you lack big players like that in big games, maybe it's something Lauren thought, this is what we're going to go after, but they did it. The run from Doherty to get the first goal for Bonus. When you have strikers like O'Neill and Bonus up there who are working so hard, as a defender, you're caught in between, because you're like, I need to follow this man, I need to commit, we need to maybe have two men committing to these guys. That's what's creating space for the likes of Miller, and clearly he was the special sauce, the missing ingredient in this Lauren's side. So look, we could be sitting here come Tuesday, come next week, and this could just be a blip for Crusaders. But that was, and not to say everything's about Glentoran this season, that was a Glentoran-esque performance. If that was Glentoran, you would have said, well, this is what they're doing all season. This is how strong they are. If you're Lauren, you're sitting there going, oh, can we do that Glentoran game again? Let's go at this. And perhaps going into that big game, getting a bit of a bruising, sets you out saying, right, we will match them game for game, and makes them even more hungrier. I want to talk to you about this little subject here because I saw you on the television. I saw you moonlighting there. You were, quote unquote, local journalist on the Irish League show. And I bring this up because your team played on Friday and Lauren are having a great run on Friday. And I'm not saying you suggested this, but you kind of spoke about the players getting in for a Friday night game and how, compared to a Saturday, they're coming home from work. And I wonder, yes, a lot of these Friday games are bringing in crowds, but are these Friday night games now giving, it might only be a slight edge, is this giving some slight advantage to these full-time teams? I know there's been like maybe 2 or 3 times where a bottom 6 side has been able to get any sort of result against a full-time or a top 6 side. But when you are a part-time side and your players are coming from work, they may be traveling a distance from work, and then they're traveling maybe to an away game. Saturday is somewhat of a leveler where they're all at 3 o'clock, they all should be off during the day, and they all know that that's when game's going to happen. But when Lauren have spent the time maybe resting, or any full-time team, I'm not singling out Lauren, and they have been working, they've been training, they've been resting, and they're bringing in a team who their players may have been rushing from an hour away. Is this something we need to look at potentially, or am I seeing something that isn't there?
No, I do understand your point. As far as I'm aware, both clubs have to agree to a fixture change in the Premiership. You know, the home club obviously suggests that, look, we want to move our game from Saturday to Friday night. So as far as I know, it's within the gift of the away side to say, no, look, we prefer to keep it on Saturday. So, you know, there is that get out, I suppose, for maybe a part-time club if they want to do that. I suppose from a Newry perspective, who, you know, are obviously a part-time club, and it's the attendance wise is massively boosted for Friday night games. I've had quite a few Friday night games this season. Played Lauren at home on Friday night, matched them for quite a bulk of the game, hit the post, and then they scored 2 goals in 2 minutes to go and win. I think, you know, for in terms of the full-time teams, they're training maybe 4 or 5 mornings a week, maybe doing the odd double session early on in the week. They are, the rest of their day, they're getting to relax. So I don't think it would matter to them at all when they're playing. It could be a leveler. I think it's probably maybe a wee bit simplistic to look at it that way. It's only going to be so much of a leveler if you have, you can see, as you touched on there, but, you know, Larne and Glentoran, who are full time, to use those 2 examples, that, you know, they're training together every single day. They'll be able to work on patterns of play on, you know, and specific to the opposition, much more than, say, to use the example of the likes of Newry, who are training 2 nights a week, which is less than half the time of those full-time teams. So whilst a 3 o'clock kickoff may level the playing field to some extent, I don't think it will make a whole lot of difference. I do know Darren Mullen will say, you know, our players are coming off a building site and stuff like that, and they're going to play matches, but that's just it's still the majority of clubs in the Irish League are having to do that. The full time clubs, whilst they are more of them now, I mean, Crusaders are what, sort of 3/4 time, I think, still. With the likes of Cliftonville, I think, are training 3, possibly 4 nights a week. So they're full time without being full time. So still the bulk of the clubs are able to get results, even the bottom 6, against those full time teams. So it's a balancing act. But look, to be honest, in the next 3 to 5 years, I think this is going to be a moot point completely, because I think the vast majority of the Premiership is going to be full time. And I know from speaking to Niffle that that's what they want. They want 85 to 90% of the top flight to be professional in the next 3 to 5 years, not given Jared Lawler himself. So that's what we're looking at.
You have just cracked open the door. I was having a little Friday conversation, and that would be fascinating, because I do think this is the other side of this discussion, that potentially the Irish League heading towards it being actually it's a Friday night league. And clearly Larne and other teams are pushing the Friday night games because it's better for attendance and they see this is a way they can grow. Derry City are majority on a Friday night. They're getting big fans down there. And you make the point I wanted to bring up just about how, yes, both teams do agree for it to be played on a Friday, and we've been seeing a lot of Friday night games because of the TV. If there is a game that's been suggested, your game being played on a Friday, I can see why both teams would want to give it a go, right? But if you're Dungannon or you are Coleraine this month, where you're playing Larne away, you're playing Larne at Inver Park on a Friday, I'm all for holding hands, all working together. But you're giving them a slight edge and you're agreeing to that.
Yeah. It's not a no. You're correct.
If you are a Coleraine and you're not getting results against these top 6 teams, which they're not, and I'm sure this was decided ages ago, could we see it closer to the time, come March, April time, where every team is really keen to get a result, and the Dungannon are asked, can you play at Inver Park on Friday? They might go, you know what, maybe we could sneak a draw if it wasn't Saturday. Actually, no. I haven't heard a lot of the debates and discussions over moving it. Of course, games can move later on a Saturday, whatever. But could that be a thing that could creep up? Am I wrong?
No doubt, yeah. I mean, if look at the end of the day, if you set aside everything else, when it comes to the crunch, if you need to do something or make a decision that's going to benefit your specific club, whether that's Dungannon, Glenavon, any of the part-time clubs, when you're playing against a full-time club, particularly come, the so-called business end of the season, then you're going to make that call and it would be 100% right. And I would say it would probably be respected by the full-time clubs going, yeah, actually, no, you're right. We're not giving you an advantage. We want to give our players more time to, recover from work and come and play on a Saturday because it's going to benefit us. I suppose it's a no-brainer, but it's interesting that setting aside even the televised fixtures, a lot of the Friday night games, I think if we look back, you'll find that the part-time clubs involved. Now, whether that's part-time clubs against full-time clubs or part-time club against a part-time club, if I'm thinking correctly, that seems to be the way. So part-time clubs are looking at it from a financial aspect, and I suppose at the start of the season you would hope they're asking their players to sort of buy into that and going, look, we know you guys and the bulk of you guys are working, and you might be working to 4 or 5 o'clock on a Friday, depending on whether you're playing away and things like that. And they obviously have to hope their respective employers are able to give them an hour out of work, or they might have to work over the lunch break or something like that, to get away. So I would presume that they would have bought into that at the start of the season and know what's in front of them, so they're able to be mentally prepared. But as you say, there's probably no way you can be as physically prepared for a Friday night game, particularly away from home, if you're working, than if you're on a Saturday game. Look, I know some of the Newry players that maybe not necessarily this season, but certainly the last time we were in the Premiership would have been working Saturday mornings, going to the game on Saturday afternoon, and they're manual jobs, they're not necessarily labouring, but, somebody's maybe a tiler, somebody's a joiner, and you're going to do a bit of work on Saturday morning. So would I like to see that change? Yeah, absolutely. And I think it will change. I think it's going to be not forced to change, but I think it's going to be moved in that direction where everybody is going to, one time or another in the next 3 to 5 years, to say, are going to be full time. So I think it's maybe a case of just getting used to it and sucking it up and just hanging on in there until a sugar daddy comes along to every club. I'm doing the Euro Millions every week, and I don't have a kid gambling, by the way, but I'm doing the Euro Millions, and I've already, every time I buy a Euro Millions ticket, I'm thinking, okay, so I've won 10 million. How many million am I putting into Newry City?
Gareth, I ask this question all the time. I've asked this to my family and my brothers, and we all asked us around one Christmas, and we said, what would be the first thing you do if you win the lottery? And all 3 of the lads, without question, went, well, we would buy our team. We would buy our Irish League team straight away. So yeah. I'm with you. I've been there. And while we are here on Diversion Avenue, this is not totally in their hands, but the idea that we could be sitting here in a couple of years, more full-time teams rather than less. I put up an interesting stat there last week about just the difference in attendance we've seen in the league since the league back in, was it 08-09, like the first 12 team league of this current iteration of the league. And look, the league was missing a bigger Portadown, and maybe you didn't have bigger teams, but at the end of that season in 08-09, the total attendance was 118,000. Right now, after 12, 13 games, we're sitting on over 100,000 across the league. Numerous teams are sitting there with well over 1,000 as their average attendance. We have some of the big teams like Glentoran, Linfield, Larne, and Coleraine sitting with their average pretty much 2,000, if not more. In fact, look at Newry. I'm not saying they're on the precipice of being full-time, but their attendance now compared to what it was back in 0809, it is incredible. And that is going to be the main revenue source teams could look at and go, this is the thing where we could move this forward, increase wages, and something that was a pipe dream might not be so soon in the future.
Yeah, I mean, look, from a Newry fan's perspective, it's hard to envisage Newry going full time inside that 3 to 5 year sort of period that I've said, and I'm sure a number of other clubs are in the exact same boat. It has to be financially viable, because the last thing you want to do, the current full time teams are not going to go back to part time ever, unless there's a massive, unless the backside falls out of the economy completely, and nobody has any money whatsoever, which is, don't get me wrong, a distinct possibility, but but that's a whole other discussion. We'll do that for another time. But in terms of the actual financial aspect of it, once you go and make that decision to become full time, it's not a thing you can just turn around at the end of the season and say, okay, next season we're going full time. There has to be probably a 2 year running period, I would have thought, especially for a club to use Newry as an example. So you need to make sure that if you are deciding to go full time, and every aspect of your club is going full time, particularly your playing staff and your management, then you need to make sure that you're able to sustain that, because the worst thing that can happen is you fire all your eggs into one basket, it doesn't work, and then the only option is to drop back down to part time, and every other club in the league is full time, and you're stuffed then, because there's going to be, I genuinely do think that we're 2022, I genuinely think in 10 years time it's going to be a requirement that you're going to have to be a full-time team in 10 years. I honestly,
Wow.
That's not me. That's just my own personal opinion. And that's just from speaking to people. I think that it is the way we're going. And people will look at the likes of the financial investment from Kenny Bruce at Larne, from Ali Poor at Glentoran, and think that they are the norm. And they aren't. They're exceptional circumstances, because you got two guys that have come in there with massive amounts of money and are able to financially back their sides. The other full-time teams don't have those sort of financial investments. They get it from other means, whether they get it from sponsorship, European football, crowd attendances, so it's not a case of everybody has to have a Kenny Bruce. Like, if every Irish club had a Kenny Bruce, it would be unbelievable, because I think what he does for the league is just, I genuinely think that Larne are pulling everybody up. From spoken to Kenny numerous times personally, he wants to see the league. He wants to help the league. Yes, fair enough. He's not going to go out and give money to all the rest of the clubs, but he's happy to share resources and things like that. So I genuinely think this is what's going to happen. It scares me a bit being a Newry fan, to be quite honest, because I don't know how Newry can compete with that. But look, the clubs can't say they haven't been warned, because if you want to compete and you want to be moderately successful, you need to be using those top clubs as a benchmark, setting aside the finances, but you need to be using those clubs as a benchmark as to how you run first and foremost, and then that attracts financial opportunities. So look, we could be talking here in 3 years' time, and hopefully our podcast still going, and we're all back to part time, and I can be talking absolute nonsense, and feel free to bring this back up.
This discussion somewhat reminds me of the chat I had with Keith Bailey from the Belfast Telegraph back in, was it episode 2 or 3? You'll be able to find it there. It's the Game Week 2 one, where we talked about this potential worry that we could look at this league and teams looking to push forward, looking to try and recapture some of their success. They over push themselves, and then what that could really mean. And we could be sitting here looking back and thinking, that surely we could see this was not sustainable. But when the European money is as good as it is looking, and particularly winning the league, we saw at Linfield it's a nice little garden path for the champions path in Europe. So is everybody gambling for that? Yes. But Kenny Bruce says he puts 5 million into Larne. Well, if Linfield were able to hold off against RFS, they would have had multiple millions in their bank account just from being in the Europa Conference League alone. And you see the top average attendances. and you compare that to the League of Ireland, which is a full-time league, pretty much. Maybe there's one or two that isn't, but it's pretty much a full-time league, and that's very equivalent. Yes, there's clearly the big teams, the likes of Rovers sitting there with a 4,500 average. But if you were to take right now the Coleraine, Glentoran, Linfield, and Larne averages all over 2,000. Linfield's over 3.5. There's been big games played, of course. That's right in the middle of League of Ireland. You start adding in Shamrock Rovers, is a completely different discussion. Shamrock Rovers in there, that would be even higher. You know, they don't have the smaller fan bases that the Irish League potentially does, and there is room for growth. I'll park this conversation and quickly go back to that Newry stat of Newry sat with an average of 305 in the 08-09 season. They're now sitting on an average 3 shy of 1,000. They've already, of the 17 games they played at home back then in 08-09, in 6 games you've already surpassed the total amount of fans at the Newry Showgrounds by 800.
Mm-hmm. And well, I think people will probably look at that and say, well, you're getting maybe bigger away attendances and stuff like that, which I appreciate, and that does factor into it. But the biggest thing from Newry's perspective is Newry have a much stronger home support than they had back then, and that's just grown exponentially over the last sort of, I suppose, 10 years since the club reformed. So there's a lot to be said about that sort of community aspect and that local players and a bit of success. Like, as I've always said, if you're in, regardless of what league you're in, Newry won the championship last year, and the average attendance for the second half of the season in the championship was over 1,000. The average home attendance, and that's absolutely unheard of. I mean, the only one to have come close to that would have been Portadown, a few years ago, and not even Larne. Whenever Kenny Bruce first came in, we're getting that. So it's growing. Unfortunately, I suppose from a Newry perspective, while the Newry are growing and Newry are improving and they're getting bigger attendances in and maybe run better, the entirety of the league is getting bigger and better and stronger and more financially secure. So it's about not trying to keep in touch with and overstretching yourself, as you touched on there, with the likes of a Larne or Glentoran, because, as I said, there are exceptions to the rule. Linfield have always had the financial muscle behind them, and they're able to add to that by the European football year in, year out. So I think what it probably requires is one of those clubs outside the top 6, if you like, getting a European run to it, and it's your turn this year. I don't know, it's Cliftonville next year, and then it's Glenavon, and then it's Ballymena, and then it's Newry, and then it's, that's what, obviously that can't be done that way, but that's what it might take. It might take just that one brilliant season for a smaller club, if you like, get that European money in, and that can make it financially sustainable if used correctly for a long, long time.
And as you said, what's to stop a potential future lottery winner or somebody from elsewhere thinking, I want a slice of this Alipoor, this Kenny Bruce pie.
We all have our fingers crossed.
Oh, there was other games that were played this weekend, and we have to talk about them on this podcast, and we want to talk about them because in many ways they were fantastic in their own little unique kind of way. Dungannon, you can win games without giving away penalties, guys. I know you're not winning games at the minute, but giving away penalties aren't usually a good thing. They have given away 4 within 100 minutes of football. They gave away 2 within the first 10, 11 minutes of that game against Glentoran. It was a different keeper in nets after Dwayne Nelson saved 2 against Crusaders the week before. Declan Dunn was like, lads, start hacking boys in the box. I need to show up that man that I can do it too. And Glentoran were there. They were happy to oblige with their own fairly poorly hit penalties. Like I said, that actually Conor McMenon's second one was pretty good, but Jed Donnelly's wasn't great. It was still scored by Glentoran, and after a brief scare, the current league leaders run out 3-1 winners against a dogged Swift side, but one that still aren't able to get the points, and no one really expected them to get anything from the Oval. But right now, I look at this side of Glentoran and I go, Luke McCullough, where on earth does he fit into this team? Even when they are missing penalties and the team opposite them is scoring goals from their own half, they're still able to turn the screw and run into the night with 3 points in their backpack.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sign of a really good team. They're winning matches that, maybe they're expected to win, but they don't perform as well, and they're grinding out wins. It was the same down at Newry Showgrounds a couple of weeks ago. Paddy McLean makes an unbelievable tackle in the 95th minute to deny Newry an equaliser, and you just go, well, that's why they hadn't conceded in so long. You touched on that, Luke McCullough still to come back in, and he's, be good to see him back because he's such a great player, in general, and he'd be a brilliant player for the league to have playing regularly. You still have Shannon Clucas to come back in as well, who was probably one of Glentoran's better players last season. It's again a cliche, but when you have a player like Conor McMenamin playing for you, who is the best player in the league, and certainly on form as the best player in the league so far this season, he can create something out of nothing. He can stick the ball in the back of the net even when he's not playing to the peak of his powers. And that's what happens when you have that. You're playing with confidence. You're picked for the international team. Just enjoying your football. You're happy in the environment you're in. And he looks happy. He's a good guy, Connor, and he deserves all the success he gets. And they are looking dangerous in terms of the penalties. Yeah, the penalties are sort of like the Man City, aren't they? Man City have missed like 24 penalties out of 80 or something under Pep Guardiola, which is really weird for such a top team. From a Dungannon perspective, I saw two penalties, particularly the second one, the one that Conor McMenamin missed. I think it was John Scott actually gave away both of them. And I remember seeing John Scott playing for Loughgall last season, the championship against Newry, and he's super fullback, a
Yes.
really, really good player. He's probably unfortunate, but they're both penalties. The second one, he seemed, what looks to me is they got caught playing out from the back again, and he just, against a team like Glentoran who are going to press you high, sometimes you just have to put the ball long. They can't score if the ball's, well, I was going to say you can't score if the ball's in the other half of the pitch, but that sings in nicely to Dungannon's
Your
goal.
man Bruna said, hey, people aren't able to score against McCarry. You have to think of new ways. And I guess scoring from that far out is a different way to score against McCarry.
Mm-hmm.
I think Glentoran are somewhat at fault for that. I saw their social media all week into that game, and they were like, playing Dungannon this week at the Oval. Remember this time we played against Dungannon in the Oval, and Rory Donnelly was able to score a header from like 30 yards out.
Mm-hmm.
That's where he got the idea. He was maybe online. He's thinking, you know what, actually, see at the Oval, you should just fire in long goals. Maybe he was watching that playoff, that European playoff, another goal, albeit that was ridiculously far away for Larne, but the Oval can produce the odd long goal.
I think he was watching Brian Healy's goal from the halfway line for Newry in the League Cup on Tuesday night against Cliftonville, which was a spectacular effort. But look, Gerardo Bruna, how quickly he hits it, and there's two or three players around him. It's a great dig. Dean was coming out and complaining about the officials again after the game. You're going, well, the two penalties were penalties. They didn't score from either of them, scored from a rebound. The first one, look, Glentoran are the team to beat. Such a wild bit of analysis there. They look so comfortable at the minute. They're playing with confidence. They're playing with a regular team week in, week out. We only have to make one or two changes, and anybody that they're bringing in, different to last season, the players coming in maybe weren't performing, and the players come like Hervoy Plum maybe was coming off the bench a bit more last season and wasn't playing the way he played in his first season at Glentoran. Been fantastic this season. Conor Mack's on fire. You're able to bring James Singleton in when Marcus Kane gets injured, like or Bobby Burns can slot in there. It's ridiculous. But listen, they deserve to be where they are, and they'll be a really tough nut to crack and a hard team to get off the top of that table.
Very much so. Look, I don't want to be that kind of guy here, Gareth, but I do have to correct your pronunciation. I believe it's former Liverpool and Real Madrid player Gerardo Bruna.
That's his full name.
That's his full name. Just be aware that it is former Liverpool and Real Madrid youth player Gerardo Bruna. That's who he is. I believe that was his first start. Fair play. You talk about goals in and out. If you watch the two goals, was it in the second half for Glentoran? The man in the middle of it was Danny Purkis. He's been their magic man off the bench, and I'm here to pose the question because I've saw chat online from some Glentoran fans. Is now the time potentially for him to start? You've got a Tuesday night game. Maybe that's the time to rotate things and put him in because he scored cracking goals against Linfield, got goals against Larne, a real key cog setting up the others. He's a big, strong presence there. Perhaps he's made really to be that off the bench man. But if he was on to Mick McDermott's door and he was knocking it saying, Gaffer, start me, I think he's got a fairly strong portfolio to say, fair play.
Yeah, he's actually probably, and this is no disrespect to Danny whatsoever, but he's probably the player that surprised me the most this season, because anytime I've seen him come off the bench, he's contributed something. I mean, he hasn't just run around or been a target man or had a couple of nice touches or a couple of shots. He's contributed assists, he's contributed goals. His link-up play is very good. He's deceptively quick. He's not just a big target man, to launch the ball up to. He's a different player to Jay Donnelly, but I'm not saying he's as good as Jay Donnelly by any stretch, but he certainly gives Glentoran a different dimension. You've Ali Roy as well. He was coming off the bench earlier in the season, who was scoring goals, and Glentoran fans were clamouring for him to start. Still probably hasn't really started. Started a couple of League Cup games, I think, but hasn't really started in the league. I mean, you've got a player that's played Scottish Premier League football, that's more than capable of coming on as well. So they have so many options. I mean, I suppose from Mick McDermott's perspective, they're looking at it and going, well, it's working pretty well so far. If I can bring Danny Perkins off the bench with half an hour to go or 20 minutes to go, and I know he's going to contribute something because he's in form, I'd say, whilst Danny Perkins would probably want to start, probably understands the lay of the land. He's been out of the top flight for a couple of years, but he's come in and he's hit the ground running. And look, maybe that's what happens when you play for your boyhood club. You do have that sort of, maybe that little bit of extra desire. So, fair play to him.
I don't usually toot my own trumpet. I don't usually do that. But here I was last week and I said, you know what, after that result in the League Cup and a few other games against lower opposition, Cliftonville might be due a defeat or a dodgy result against a bottom six side. And after 72 minutes, Joe Gormley scoring his 250th goal in the league, the 15th, I believe, against Glenavon. I was looking pretty silly, just like I've been looking pretty silly a lot this season. But up steps Glenavon, the man who will always be there to cause a bit of drama. And from 2-0 down, they bring it to 2-2. A simply exquisite performance from Micheál Glynn. He was the magic man on the wing that was the engine behind both those goals for Glenavon, and how they could have turned it all around. They had 10 men in front of them, almost a full meltdown for Cliftonville. Easily 2 points loss if you're Paddy McLaughlin right now.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't happen last season. If you look at how good Cliftonville were last season, it seems to be something just hasn't quite clicked yet this campaign. Full credit to Gary Hamilton and Glenavon, because they obviously saw an opportunity. They saw, many teams away at Solitude when you're 2-0 down, as you say, with less than 20 minutes to go. You're probably thinking, well, you're a beaten dogged here. But they've obviously seen enough that they knew they were capable of getting something out of it. I think from Cliftonville's point of view, they'll be sorely disappointed that they didn't see the game out. You have the massive experience of the likes of Colin Coates on the bench there. Maybe when you're not playing as well as you were last season, or you're not quite up to that level yet, rather than going and trying to finish the game off and wrap it up, make it 3-0, do you maybe bring a really vastly experienced defender on for the last 20 minutes and just hold what you have? But huge credit to Glenavon. Glenavon, as I think we touched on the last time, I think we probably touched on in regular weeks, it's like the Forrest Gump, Glenavon are like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
I can't even get excited about this result for them. I can't even go, here we go, because every time you go, hey, watch out, here comes Glenavon coming down the track, top six, here we go. And then it's a draw against Portadown, or it's on the other end of a thumping against Newry, and you're thinking, what is it? They don't really turn up and get going until they're 2-0 down away from home. And Cliftonville are so confident they've got it wrapped up. Off comes Ronan Hale, off comes Rory Hale, and they're trying to turn this around. And if you are a Glenavon fan, or you're like what are you trying to do? Like, you see it against Ballymena, they're giving these goals away, and you're thinking, come on, like, does he need to tell these players, oh lads, I've made up this new rule, we're being punished, they say we're 2-0 down, so just remember that going in, you got 90 minutes, like, when the chips are down, Glenavon suddenly appear. It's like when you're playing five-a-side and those boys are passing the ball about, and all of a sudden someone says, all right, 5 minutes, and you're 4 goals down, and all of a sudden here they come, powering forward. They clearly have the players to do it. Like I said, Micheál Glynn, watch those goals. He's the man. Thundered into the box on the left-hand side to whip it in. They almost look exactly the same. Fair play to Josh Doyle. I don't know how much he knew about it, but it somehow bundled in. And then it's an own goal from Addis for the second one. Both within the last 10 minutes of the game, and how close it could have been for them to potentially bring it home all three. If anybody was going to bring home all three in stoppage time, it was clearly going to be Glenavon. Let's talk about the red card. It sees Peter Campbell sprinting down the left-hand side of the Glenavon pitch into Cliftonville territory. Oran Casey comes in. Campbell goes high into the sky. It doesn't look like it's a particularly violent or aggressive tackle, but if Campbell needs to go that high into the air and he still gets clipped, you can see that's dangerous play. I can see how that's a red card. I hear Cliftonville fans getting annoyed about the commotion that came from the Glenavon bench. I believe Paul McAreevy got a yellow card from the Glenavon bench for entering the field of play, the sacred field of play. Was it a red card for you? Wasn't too much complaints from the Cliftonville side?
I don't think it's a red card, no.
Ooh.
Now, I'm probably showing some slight bias because Oran Casey was on loan for Newry with Newry the second half of last season and became a real favourite.
Say it, Gareth. Say it.
What?
Is he not that type of player?
Oh no, he's exactly that type of player.
He's not on the list. I've got a list here of not those kind of players, and there he goes. Very much one of those players. Okay, keep on going. In his locker, they say.
Oh yeah, I mean he'll get stuck into anybody, and that's sort of probably why supporters like him. So I don't think it's red card. I can understand if I can sort of the caveat that I can see why he's been sent off, but watching it back. Peter Campbell is streaking up the left-hand side. Peter Campbell, one of the best wingers in the league, in my opinion. Fantastic footballer. Oran Casey has only one intention, and that's to stop him getting any further. You know what? There's absolutely no doubt about that. He doesn't go to play the ball, so that is the reason why he's been shown a straight red. If you watch the tackle, it's been claimed it was high. It's not high. His right foot is 6 inches max off the ground. He doesn't lead with his studs. He clips his foot. It's a foul. It's not a good foul. It looks in my opinion, it looks 10 times worse than it actually is. And I mean, we can say about Gary Hamilton, Paul. I mean, Gary Hamilton was about 10 yards onto the pitch. Paul McAreevy was waving an imaginary card about. And look, if it was your own team, you'd fully expect your own manager to do the same. I can, from a Glenavon perspective, I can totally understand why it's they were going mad, going, that's an obvious red card. I just actually think it's worse than it looks. But to give, I think it was Ross Dunlop was the referee, to give him his dues, he gets to say it once. He gets to say it in that split second, has to make a decision. I can fully understand when he's saying that once at that pace, that he's going to send him off. Bear in mind how quick Peter Campbell is. Oran Casey isn't slow, by the way, but how quick Peter Campbell is, Oran Casey had no option but to take him down. But he took him down rather than taking him out. In my opinion, I don't think he went to injure him. I don't think it was malicious. It was deliberate, but I don't think it was malicious. But look, my view, I will hold my hands up and say my view will be skewed somewhat because Oran Casey we absolutely loved him down at Newry in the second half of last season because he was absolutely brilliant. Yeah, hopefully that means Paddy McLaughlin will say, no, you're never playing for Cliftonville again, and you can go off sign a pre-contract with Newry in January or something like that.
Is that your can we go and get him play? Is that what that is? Come on. Casey, come down to Newry. You're more than welcome.
Trust me, that go and get him play has been used numerous times from the end of last season right up until this moment in time. So yeah, this isn't the first time it's come out.
For our next game, I'm going to start our little review like I'm doing a GCSE English paper, and I'm going to start with a quote. Possibly the worst we've played all season. That is the quote from anonymous Linfield fan that I got at halftime. Linfield, go into the Curry House of Shamrock Park. They're shut out at halftime. Everybody was thinking, here it is. Niall Curry's got the little spicy mixture to make this Portadown team a little bit fiery, a little bit juicy, and it looks like three at the back and wing backs and two strikers up top. And for 45 minutes, it looked as though, my goodness, they could somehow do the unbelievable and potentially sneak a draw against Linfield. I'm not going to say it was going to be some sort of runaway win, but a draw was definitely on the cards. David Haley takes off an injured Kirk Miller at half time, puts on E2 Vertanen. I don't know what he did to Joel Cooper. Did he physically wind him up to get him more feisty, to get him more energetic? It was a different Linfield side in that second half. Portadown held on. They made it difficult. They frustrated Linfield as they got into the game. But Linfield, turning that screw, they eventually found their way through that Portadown back line. It ends 3-0, but from an entire game point of view, I really wanted to see Linfield live, and that's what I went down to see them. That was not a 3-0 game. So as much as Portadown didn't really have a huge amount of chances, there was plenty of corners. Oh, I was dizzy by the amount of corners both teams got. Neither really did with anything with any of those corners. But Linfield eventually get the result. 2 goals later on, 3-0. They'll be happy. Of course, your Newry team were potentially the last team to go down to Shamrock Park. You were a part of Doolan's downfall. When you see a team like Portadown and they're sort of somewhat around you and you got that win against Doolan, when you see them change up the team, are you thinking, I would have preferred you just kept going down the tracks that you were on there?
I think sure Newry fans, Dungannon fans, probably Glenavon, Carrick, all those teams sort of in around that bottom 6 would have happily, with a bit of respect, would have happily let Paul Doolan stay on at Shamrock Park. In terms of Niall Curry coming in, I have to admit, I thought he's probably the best choice, but I'm surprised to see him go back. But now, to be fair, listening to his interviews, much his interviews when he took the role, he sort of said he had unfinished business, and he felt things had changed since the last time he was there. So he was very honest. I mean, that's the one thing you'll get out of Niall Curry. He's as honest as the day is long, and he's not backwards and coming forwards, and it's probably the type of manager that Portadown need at this point. He was very shrewd in his first interview with the club media channels, where he said, it's going to take us a few weeks to work out, what my best team is and the formations and get to know the players, knowing full well that he had Coleraine, Linfield, and I think maybe Glentoran or somebody, another big team coming up the next few weeks. So essentially bought him a bit of time in terms of he does need to work out what his best team is, but he's looking at it going, well, don't be expecting me to get points off Coleraine, Linfield, and Glentoran. What I saw of the highlights, even the couple of chances that Portadown had in the second half, there was a couple of efforts they looked to have, and they just looked to even be playing with more pace than they did certainly that night against Newry. And they were probably unlucky against Newry. I mean, that probably wasn't a 3-1 win for Newry either. I thought Newry maybe just shaved it, but it wasn't a 3-1, the same way this game, as you say, wasn't a 3-0. There's obviously green shoots of recovery, but the big telltale is going to be come January. Now is, and I'm sure he won't thank me for saying this, is probably as good a wheeler dealer as there is in terms of the Irish League. He'll bring in whatever players he needs to bring in from wherever he needs to bring them in from, if it's going to help Portadown the rest of the season. It's not going to be a transfer window where they bring in 1 or 2 players. There'll probably be about 5 or 6 at least will go, and at least 7 or 8 will come in. I would say there's a distinct possibility of that. So in terms of Saturday's match, that's probably what happens with teams down, the wrong end of the table against the likes of a Linfield. You can hold out Linfield, you can be doing really well. Linfield score 1, and then you're maybe plugging away trying to get a goal back and think you can get something out of it, and then score 2 late goals, and everybody goes, oh well, sure, everybody expected Linfield to win 3-0 down there when, as you say, it wasn't a 3-0 game. On Linfield, I mean, it's very much similar to Glentoran in terms of they have Conor McMenamin, Linfield with Joel Cooper can change the game even when the team isn't playing well, can make a massive difference, particularly when David Healy said after the Newry game last week that, well, I brought in Jimmy Gallagher, I brought in Jimmy Mulgrew, who's the need boys that had seen the hard times, had been there when we needed people in the trenches type of thing. That was what he said in his post-match interview with me. He's gone back to basics, and that was the actual term he used. He's gone back to basics. It might not be pretty football necessarily, it might not be free-flowing for a while for Linfield until they sort of get back into that rhythm, get that bit of momentum. But Linfield will keep chipping away and trying to close the gap to the top teams. So Portadown, I think, will improve. I just for their sakes, I think the damage might have been done a wee bit too early already. But as one manager is going to get a team to become greater than the sum of their parts, it's Niall Curry. From a Euro perspective, I just hope they have a terrible run from now to January, because then they bring in this influx of unbelievable players in January and then start winning left, right, and centre.
Well, they've got 3 games against Newry. They have 4, I believe, against Carrick. But a quick note on Linfield. They did struggle in the first half, found a bit more rhythm in the second. Joel Cooper was really the main man. And you'll hear Curry talking about how he just really doesn't feel his team is fit. And a team that isn't really fit gives away late goals. Joel Cooper assists 2, scores 1. He played out in that second half far out to the right with Vertinen coming in. It almost had that 3 up at the top with McDaid in the middle. The one thing I think Linfield lack is attack from wide wing-back areas. You look at Glentoran and you have Kane and Marshall and sometimes Burns. Lauren clearly have Cosgrove and whoever's playing on the other side, be it Randall or Doherty. I don't see that wide attack from Linfield, which is when teams like Portadown play 5 at the back pretty much. Who's going to break through? Because you haven't got those type of dynamic, nippy players coming in. This league is not overflowing with wing backs where you're thinking pick one from there. And it obviously was very solid at the start of the season, solid for the European runs. But I think that's maybe just the weakness. That's the thing that makes them less dynamic and less attackingly competent when they face against these deep lines.
I think probably part of that you're missing. I think Chris Shields is still out injured. Chris Shields just sits in front of the back four and dictates everything, and that probably allows the likes of maybe Finlayson, Matthew Clark, Niall Quinn's playing to push forward a bit more and have a bit more of an attacking influence. I suppose when things aren't going well, as David Healy said, back to the basics and just do your defensive role first and foremost, and let the attacking players do their role. So I think more as they regain confidence and get a bit of momentum, you'll probably see a bit more of that sort of attacking from wide areas. And then you got Kirk Miller going off, and Kirk Miller's in my eyes is the best deliverer of a ball in the Irish League, bar none. There's nobody even close to him. That obviously takes that weapon out of your armory. So yeah, I think they'll get there. They'll get there.
To the chagrin of Stuart King and fantasy managers everywhere, it was a Allen-less Carrick Rangers on Saturday. How they could have done with him, where Coleraine come to town and they sneak away with 3 points. Didn't seem to be much of an open or free-flowing game. Have you heard this before? King is complaining about a disallowed goal. I haven't been able to see it myself, but they get a disallowed goal. Coleraine switch it up at halftime. 3 changes at halftime. Off comes James McLaughlin, Aaron Jarvis and Rodney Brown. Dean Jarvis, Adam Mullen and Michael McCrudden come on. And it's in that second half where Coleraine get the goal. A cracking goal as well from the boot of Josh Carson. It falls to him. Like we talk about spinning on a dime or swiveling on a dime or whatever coin you like to pick. It really was. It just popped up to him. He was on the edge of the box, looked up, and it was a pure, at least 180, 270 swing round with the left boot, and the ball goes straight to the top corner. Carrick will feel disappointed not to get something out of that. Coleraine get out of jail, take the 3 points back up to the showgrounds.
Yeah, if you're a Coleraine fan, I mean, that's a big win. That's not an easy place to go. You're playing on, with all due respect, not the best surface going. Coleraine now are obviously used to playing on the 4G, and they're able to knock the ball about, and they're very good at it. The goal was fantastic. It was a goal where they win in any game. And it just sort of shows in terms of Carrick, when you don't have the likes of Curtis Allen, even though he is 34, I think their talisman this season. He's a massive, massive asset. Him and Andy Mitchell have been phenomenal this season. So it just shows, particularly down sort of the lower end of the table, when you don't have one of your main men available, how much it can weaken a side, takes that threat out. Again, I haven't seen the disallowed goal either, and knowing Sturdy as well as I do, I'm not shocked in the slightest that he's complaining about a refereeing decision. So yeah, I mean, he did that throughout his playing career as well. He's taken into management, but he's done a really good job.
Really, I haven't heard him talk about it that much this
No,
season.
no,
What's
no.
that, sir?
It's just sure he'd be very, very shy and retiring type of chap.
He very much similar to Neri. I watched the Carrick media team talking to him about it, and he's very much saying, "I'm sick of playing well, not getting results."
Mhm.
When they're playing these games and they're keeping it tighter, and they haven't been keeping it tight a lot, Carrick, and they're still not getting results, that can be very frustrating.
I would say probably they're probably looking at last season where they had such a flying start. Luckily for them, they'd built up enough points to sort of sustain that and consolidate their place in the league. Because they fell away quite badly in the sort of second half of the season. So I suppose Sturdy's probably trying to guard against that and avoid that happening again this season. I think they look a much better proposition this time around. So standards will have and expectations will have lifted from last season. Given some of the results they've had earlier on this campaign, particularly the home win against Linfield, they're a good side. One thing about Sturdy's sides is yes, they can play good football, but first and foremost, they'll be organised and they'll work their absolute socks off for him. He was, I know he was a winger and he's a wide player during his playing career, but he worked and worked and worked, and there's no substitute for it. You got experienced pros in there. McGuckin, Andy Mitchell, Curtis Allen, Jim Irvin, guys like that who have been there, done it. It shows what the expectation levels are with it both, from Carrick as a club and Sturdy King in particular. Yeah, I think they'll be all right. They look the best of the bottom six so far this season, and I've no doubt it'll probably stay that way. Sturdy just has to guard against complacency. I think the only thing that'll trouble Carrick for the remainder of the season is Carrick. If they implode, but I don't think they will. I think they're very very capable of challenging for that European playoff spot.
Loads of games to get into as we have the little Tuesday night games. So I'm sorry if you're listening this further in the week, but I've got another question to pose to you. I put it out there on Twitter. I'm sure you remember 2010. I was reminded of the little quirky, weird summer that Nigel Worthington had when he brought in a load of Irish League players into his squad and took them on a tour. And I look back at the game they played against Chile, or Chile if we're being fancy about it.
Yeah.
And they had 6 players, 4 starting: Jimmy Mulgrew, Alan Blaney, Roy Patterson, Kevin Braniff, Colin Coates, and Robbie Garrett. What a time, eh? Some of those boys are still playing in the league. And I asked the question, if Michael O'Neill, and let's all hold hands and light a candle, that is Michael O'Neill, had a quota right now and it said you have to pick 3 players from the Irish League to be in your squad no matter what every time, who is it and why is it Conor McMenamin +2?
Well, it's definitely Conor McMenamin. I think that's an absolute no-brainer. I would probably, at the moment, and given the fact that he's had previous international experience, would be Joel Cooper as well. We are looking at, 2 sort of similar type players. I'm desperately trying to think of a sort of midfield type defensive sort of player. To be honest, the only other one who I could see potentially doing it, and this is purely on form at the minute, is Leroy Miller. I'm not, and this is probably sound extremely harsh. I'm not convinced technical ability wise that he's up there with the likes of the current midfielders that we have in Northern Ireland. But in terms of what he gives you in his presence, even at international level, I think he would certainly be worth bringing into the squad and letting the new manager, whoever that may be, have a look at him. Um, I think just sitting and looking at it very, very briefly, one player that has to be in the next Northern Ireland squad, regardless of who the manager is Paul Smith. How Paul Smith has missed out when he's been fit it baffles me. Is he's on form for Leighton Orient? We also saw that video of all his montage of goals. Um, there are very few players that we have at our disposal that are that technically gifted. And I think he certainly, with now and again, really sort of not that's him. His career based essentially international career essentially finished, I would suggest. It's certainly a player that should be given a shout anyway. I think you'll see Kofi Balmer staying in there as well, given the fact he's been the bench a couple of times for Palace. So, but yeah, those are the 3. And I would probably, if you asked me 3 different players tomorrow, I would probably give you 2 different ones plus Conor McMenamin. So it's just there are players there that I think could do a job, but whether they get selected and whether they're up to it, well, there's only one way to find out. If they're up to it, you bring them into the squad and see how they go.
Joe Cooper, really strong shout. And mine are all attacking players, really. I was trying to see if there was a more defensive midfield player, and I do think age is a key thing here, because any Northern Ireland player you bring in, it's potentially a launch pad. I feel that's why there has been interest in McMenamin, and everybody's looking at it. Clearly, Dallas is the archetype. He's the blueprint. We've obviously seen other players come from the league and push through, and Kofi Balmer hopefully is the next one.
Mhm.
I'm banging the table. Lee Bonus, 23, hard-working player. He's really found his rhythm in the league this season, finally. You could almost maybe say Paul O'Neill could be in there, but I think he's got the legs. I think he's got the determination to be in that squad. And if he was to be a Northern Ireland international striker, I think that helps him potentially move on out of the league. Not trying to get him out of the league, but I just look at him as unlimited potential from a striking point of view, just from his hard work. He's very much like maybe like a Ward, or he fills that dogged roll up there. And yeah, I would probably say Cooper, albeit you could definitely push me into Paul O'Neill or Shevlin. Really great players that could be out of fear and could be potentially getting some big transfer fees come the summer.
It all depends who comes in, and yes, I agree with you. I hope it's Michael O'Neill.
It is
Again.
Michael O'Neill. Stop pretending it's not. We all have to wish this into existence. I'm ready to be disappointed, like I feel like I am about most things, Gareth. And could it be disappointment for Newry City again when they welcome Ballymena down into their house? Will Ballymena play nice and give you guys the 3 points out of just pure nicety and pure camaraderie?
I think if we all know David Jeffrey as we all do, I don't think any of his teams are going to play nice and roll over for you. Certainly not if he's anything to go by. As I said to you earlier, and I said after Friday night's game, I actually tweeted, I said, don't criticise the players. Haven't done it so far, I won't start now, but it's safe to say that the travelling supporters deserve a response and a performance on Tuesday night. That's the main thing for Newry. Again, as I touched on earlier, they know how not to play against Ballymena and how not to set up against Ballymena. So it's working out, well, how do they set up with probably with the same players that played on Friday night. An interesting sort of quirky stat, Newry have gone on runs of losing 3 league games in a row and then won a game a couple of times this season. So this is 3 defeats in a row in the league. By going by statistics this season, then obviously Newry are going to win 6-0.
I literally have a
I
fan
genuinely
you're advocating 3 steps backwards, 1 step forward, 3 steps back. You're literally saying that's what I hope will happen.
no. I'm saying that's the way it's sort of panned out this season. And to be quite honest, if Newry were getting a win from a fan's perspective, if Newry were getting a win 1 every 4 games, they'd be safe as houses the rest of the season. So I'm gonna actually go for a draw in that
I
game
think so
because
too.
Newry actually haven't drawn a game this season. They haven't drawn 1 game this season. They've either won or lost. I think it'll be probably more a tighter affair. Newry fans deserve a performance. They deserve a bit of a response. And you've got Carrick coming up on Saturday as well, so you need to be getting something out of Tuesday night's game going into the Carrick game, which is another big game in the context of your season.
Low-key belter of a game. Glentoran go to Glenavon. These are all Tuesday night fixtures. We look at potential banana skins for Glentoran and their speeding charge towards the Gibson Cup down at Mourneview on a Tuesday. Looks pretty slippy.
Yeah, it's one of those ones again, as we touched on earlier. What Glenavon are you going to get?
Shake the 8-ball and let's see.
I think a lot depends on which Mourneview men sort of turn up. Glentoran, probably by their own admission, haven't played as spectacularly, bar obviously the Larne game, haven't played as spectacularly maybe as they did earlier in the season. Could they be caught in the hop? Absolutely. I still think they'll have enough about them to go and win, but you just don't know, as you say. Glenavon are the most difficult team in the entire league to predict. So I'm still going to go for a Glentoran winning that one.
I'm going to say last minute winner, and I backed them last week, going to back it again. Glenavon are somehow going to sneak something, be it from a corner they shouldn't have got or something like that. I think Glenavon could welcome down to Mourneview, and we'll just see Gary Hamilton saying, oh, this is the type of performance we should have had every week. If there's a time for a big performance in the world of Niall Curry, it's going to be against Carrick Rangers. They go down to Taylor's Avenue. not being a great place for many teams this year. Do you see this is finally at the third attempt the new manager bounce could get a result here, or
Yeah,
do Carrick just look too proficient this year?
um, I suppose if there was that the Portdown River going to get something out of a game. I mean, this is a massive game for them in season. Even at this early juncture, if they can get even something out of that, it then begins. It sort of kick starts that momentum. You've seen sort of those little, as I said earlier, those little green shoots maybe against Linfield, result outstanding. It wouldn't surprise me if they get something out of it. But I'm gonna suggest though that I'm gonna call a draw on that one.
I think so. I think this as 0-0. If Portadown are playing a load of people at the back, I think this is 0-0 without Carrick Rangers got Curtis Allen to give it a go. It was a hard game for Carrick there against Coleraine, so I think this is a shutout on a cold Tuesday night. A game that is just so exciting to me, but feels slightly dampened down because of all the injuries. Crusaders go up to Coleraine, neither particularly feeling great, neither really feeling themselves. Do you see there going up to Coleraine? Does that give advantage to the home side, do you think?
I think if Coleraine stop Philip Larry from scoring, they're probably all right.
That's impossible. No one can stop Philip Laurie scoring. He's just a big man up in the box and no one can stop him. He makes the runs and he just pushes the other little tiny players like, go away, defender. You're merely only 6'1". I'm here to push you out of the way and score some headed goal or some goal where the ball just falls to me. He is having a renaissance career, Philip Laurie. So let's stick one goal down for Crusaders. Does that mean there'll be two for Coleraine?
Uh, I do think Coleraine will have enough about them just at home. They'll probably have a big crowd Tuesday night. Bit of a no, well, not a big trek for Crusaders, but enough of a trek. I just think Coleraine maybe start to gather that wee bit of momentum. Probably need to if they're going to have ambitions of making European football this season. They're going to need to start winning games like this. Not necessarily knock Crusaders out of the way, but at least sort of gain some further advantage on them. And I just think Crusaders will just have a wee bit too much. As you say, it all depends on how many of those injured players from Crusaders that you've mentioned. Very few teams aren't going to struggle with the likes of Paul Heatley, Ross Clark, Billy Joe Burns not available. That's just to name a few. So I do think Coleraine, I think Coleraine will just have slightly edged it. I'm going to go for a 2-1 in that, I think. With Philip Larry scoring, obviously.
With Philip Laurie, yeah. Maybe, I don't know, he can pass to his brother and help his brother Stephen Laurie score for Coleraine. They were without Lee Lynch. He had to come off the bench there against Carrick, maybe being held up cotton wool for this game. I think Tuesday night, the team's having to travel up to Coleraine. Coleraine should be getting a result every single time. It's going to be a poor result if they don't. I am going to predict a 2-0 win there for Coleraine. I'm just, unfortunately, maybe the Laurie streak will be over. Dungannon go to Inver Park. Dungannon having to get people out of school early for this while Lauren sit up on the deck chairs or however it works, like Dungannon are on a awful run of fixtures when it comes to tough games they face against another top team. Do you believe that Lauren have scored all their goals for the week? I don't think so.
Absolutely not. It's very. Don't get me wrong. It's a very easy one to turn out and say, well, going by stats and going by previous results, Lauren are massive favourites to this one, and they are. But I think the biggest thing, as I've touched on numerous times, that playing on a artificial surface. So both teams playing that, obviously. So Dungannon like to play football. Lauren like to play football. The difference is Lauren have a higher quality of players. Lauren will press Dungannon to the hilt non-stop. You have a full-time team that are going to be hunting you down every time you have the ball in around your own box. So if Dean Shields doesn't change it up, it's simplistic, but if Dean Shields doesn't change it up and they keep trying to play the ball in around the back, sooner rather than later they're going to get caught. You touched on there about Paul O'Neill and Lee Bonus. They're just going to charge everywhere. You could leave, and if anything breaks, Leroy Miller's just going to knock about 6 players out of the road and set one up for somebody. So I can't see anything other than a comfortable Lauren win. It'd be a massive shock if anything else happened, to be honest.
I think a bit of squad management is required here because Lauren do not have a particularly big squad, and they could see a similar fate to Crusaders if they don't look after those players. And I say that because I think it's a very motivated Lauren. We saw that on Friday. And yes, clearly if it's Leroy Miller and Bonus and O'Neill are busting the gut to go against Dungannon, that's why I see them getting a result and potentially being 2 or 3. But I can also see this being the game where Cosgrove goes off early. There's an injury to Randall. There's something else there. When you have to, that's a key part of managing in this league, is also trying to make sure that you're not completely blowing a gasket, potentially setting players up for injury when they're playing more than once. Because I can see Dungannon going into that saying, we've got nothing to lose here. We're away from home. Let's give it stacks. I do not think it will be enough. But Lauren clearly see Glentoran on front of them there, that little rabbit going down the track. They're the greyhound. I think they're more focused than ever. And we wrap up our Tuesday night games with the tastiest of the lot. This is the curry cheesy chip of the Tuesday night fixture. It is happening at Windsor Park. Cliftonville go to face Linfield, a premier fixture in this league. Any night, any day. Cliftonville are feeling sad for themselves. I don't think Linfield are really feeling themselves either. Both of them really need results to get back up. Linfield is sitting in 6th on 22. Cliftonville will not want to give them a chance to be 1 point within them. Cliftonville is sitting on 26 points, particularly after dropping those 2 points against Glenavon. I've got the big soapy sponge, and I'm trying to take off the word draw written all over this fixture. Tell me why this is not going to be a draw, sir.
I can't. It's going to be a draw. It's this will probably sound extremely harsh, particularly for Cliftonville, but both teams have probably been quite underwhelming of late, and that's purely because of the high stand. This is obviously the top two from last season. You know, Cliftonville haven't underperformed the way, and certainly not the way Linfield have by their own admission this season. But Cliftonville just don't look. They just, as I said earlier, they haven't quite clicked. They haven't. You know, Jamie McDonough had something like 27 assists last season, and has been, by his own high standards, out of sorts so far this season. Either one of these teams is going to absolutely, it's all going to come together, and it's going to kickstart, you know, a massive run, you know, where they blow teams away. More than likely, it's going to be a stalemate where they're going to cancel each other out. I'm not even convinced it'll be that exciting a game, and I know that sounds weird because
you can't even give us this is one of the most exciting 0-0s I've ever seen. It feels like this is a draw with drama. Ooh, red card. Controversial decision in the middle. Ooh, big managers with thinly veiled disagreements with the referee. Ooh, exciting. That's what I'm potentially thinking is going on.
I mean, here. You're not exactly sticking your neck in the line there to say that there could be a controversial refereeing decision. It's the Irish League after all, you know what I mean?
I tell you what, that game with Linfield and Portadown, maybe Linfield are just one of those teams that get really annoyed. You know, one of those players, I'm going to go back to the five-a-side analogy, who just gets really annoyed when he's not scoring loads or he's not winning. Linfield were starting wee testy fights with everybody over this pitch. I was like, what did Portadown do to you? Like, Beverland looking like, what's going on? You know, trying to play along, and Linfield, E2 for Tainan's just giving him the eyes, going, don't you tackle me again, you know. So Linfield are definitely up for it. They've got the energy. Let's be clear, a draw would be a really poor result for either of them. And you talk about the big seasons both teams had last year. I think that's it. I think somewhat they're out of steam very slightly. They're struggling to keep it up. Ultimately, last season is still in this calendar year. They both ran each other really hard until the end, and perhaps that's what we're seeing. Both teams went in saying, we have what we hold, and both did some freshening up, but not as much as Larne and Glentoran. I think you've just seen Larne and Glentoran are the fresher teams, but we're not talking about them here. We're talking about this game. 0-0, sir. I'm going to say that maybe it's going to be... Yeah, 0-0. I'm going to go for that.
I think there will be goals. I don't think it's going to be, you know, a 3-3 exciting drama-filled draw. I'm going to go probably for a 1 each. I just think that neither side are at the peak of their powers at the moment, so I just don't see, you know, where the excitement's coming from, and that's probably sounds pretty very harsh on both teams.
This has been a jam-packed podcast, and we really don't have time to go through all the games. There's people listening to this on Wednesday that are just laughing in our faces after the 6-2 classic that was Cliftonville against Linfield. But do any of these games in particular stand out to you that we can potentially natter on for this mammoth podcast? Because coming up from Friday to Saturday at the end of this week, Glentoran against Coleraine up at the showgrounds is the TV game on Friday. Dungannon Swifts host Cliftonville. Linfield host Glenavon again after only hosting them a few weeks ago. Larne go to Shamrock Park, and Newry take on Carrick at the Newry Showgrounds. I look at that and I go, well, Glenavon scored a few goals against Linfield. If Linfield get a result, perhaps that's another chance for Glenavon to feel themselves after whatever happened against Glentoran. Cliftonville going down to Stangmore. Stangmore's been a tight pitch for those big teams. Maybe that's happening there, but Friday night, cracking game. Coleraine, they have one chance to get a result against the top 6 team, something they cannot do seemingly this season, and even a bit of last season. Glentoran going up on a Friday night, again, that is another little slippery banana, I think.
Yeah, it's gonna. I think again, an obvious statement. Maybe I think Tuesday night's games are gonna play a part in how that Friday night game goes. Coleraine with 2 games at home. Crusaders and Glentoran, two big games for them. You're playing the leaders and the current third place team. You touched on Lee Lynch earlier. If Lee Lynch is playing, Lee Lynch will make a massive difference to that Coleraine team. I think he's a fabulous player. They miss him when he's not there. A wee bit of spark, a wee bit of creativity. Sort of part of me thinks that the Glentoran run, if you like, is going to come to an end at some point. Really, if we're looking at it in context in terms of how they performed this season, you're only talking their law of averages that the run's going to end. I don't see it in terms of football where it's going to end. That'll be a statement win. If Glentoran can win up there, that's a big win. Never an easy place to go. If they can win there on a Friday night, there'll be a fervent crowd. Glentoran will have a big crowd with them. Coleraine always have a big home crowd, particularly this season. That's going to be a tasty one. That's where I think you could get your drama. That's where I think you're going to get your excitement. There'll be a red card there. There'll be controversial refereeing decisions. So to start after saying that, there'll probably be a little draw now. Do you see Glentoran still edging that? I think
that would be a big win. A season of big wins for Glentoran. That would be very huge for them. Gareth, mega podcast this week. We went on to an exciting diversion. I cannot wait to see what Twitter makes of all our hot takes. Sir, where can people find you? How can they get into your mentions and tell you that you're a hero, or other things they may be saying to you on the internet?
I think it's more likely to be other things, Peter. Let's be quite frank here. I'm well aware of my status or lack thereof in the journalistic world.
Oh, Gareth, I've seen you get stuck in online as well. Let's not pretend.
That's the problem. That's the problem. That's why people get stuck into my mentions again. I don't know what it would know.
You're a biter, sir.
Oh no, not nearly as bad as it was. Yeah, you can get me on Twitter at Gareth_McCull MCCULL. So yeah, given that the fact that was my Twitter handle when I first set up Twitter in 2011 and never bothered actually changing it to something more sensible. I'm still doing all right. Tried numerous times to get verified on Twitter, but thankfully now you don't want to be verified because Elon Musk is changing it. It's a paid for thing now. So actually the cool people are going to be people that aren't verified. So still a trustworthy source of.
I've been telling that news for ages. I've been saying, no blue ticks for me. Yeah, who wants a blue tick anyway? I actually know a few blue tick people, and they're fumming. They're absolutely fumming, and they're just saying, "Oh yeah, Billy 652 like he's gonna get it. What does that mean?" I'm like, mate, I don't care. I just love how much this annoys you. So, yeah, no blue ticks here. I was never a fan anyway, and clearly never you. Gareth, an absolute pleasure. I'll see you soon, and let's do this again.
Cheers, Peter. Absolutely.
And so we come to the end again. Possibly the latest we have ever got here to this little bit at the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Don't blame me, blame him. He was the one that brought up all the interesting topics. I hope you enjoyed it. I know we usually get into games, but there's so many games coming up, and all the chat about potentially going full time. Lots of stuff that I hope we've can go on to Twitter. We can talk about it there. Lots of chat on Twitter this week. Loads of discussions on the Kick and Match Twitter feed. That's at Kick and Match, where we tried out a few more things. Few little stats out there. And if you want to follow me elsewhere, you can do it on Instagram, you can do it on Facebook. It's all at Kicking Match. Had some amazing reaction to the past few weeks' podcasts. Lots of love online. I'm really loving this. I feel like we're in a great rhythm right now. So yes, you could have been to plenty of games by the time you've listened to that, or you've got so many ahead of you. Regardless, thank you for your listenership. I will chat to you soon. Let's chat online. But for now, cheerio, toodles.